Since Rise of Skywalker officially comes out this week, and it happens to be my birthday today, I decided I want to talk about the sequel trilogy because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And as I've pointed out, I'm doing different things with this channel now, more of a Viva variety, whatever I'm in the mood to talk about, whether it's something political, news, entertainment, etc. So, yeah. Okay, so like I mentioned, huge Star Wars fan. I don't think I need to point that out any further. But in my honest opinion, I feel like this sequel trilogy could have been way better. And it's nothing against any of the actors or actresses involved with the sequel trilogy. I think they all did their best. But unfortunately, I feel like they've been let down by forces beyond their control, like Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, those three. But let's go ahead and we'll start at the beginning. My thoughts about the announcement of the sequel trilogy. And we'll go through each movie, my thoughts about each one. This will probably be a long video. And I know I'm not a Star Wars channel. There's plenty of other Star Wars channels out there. They do great work. In fact, I watch a few of their videos on a regular basis. But for today, I'm going to do a Star Wars video. But we'll start things off with Force Awakens. Now, when it was officially announced after Disney acquired Lucasfilms for George Lucas, that they were planning on new content revolved around Star Wars, not just a new sequel trilogy, but other movies and TV shows, I was okay with it as a Star Wars fan. And look, I know the prequels were not perfect. Far from. I enjoy them, despite their flaws. But overall, I love the Clone Wars. Oh, that was great. I'm glad we're getting another season of Clone Wars. I hear Mandalorian's really good. I need to check it out when I get a chance. And I enjoyed Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, most recently from Respawn. And I hear that EA DICE is doing great stuff with Star Wars Battlefront 2. So there's some good things going on with Star Wars. But the sequel trilogy had so much potential, yet, unfortunately, through a series of events, has resulted in it becoming basically garbage. Now, when they announced Force Awakens, I was excited. I was thinking, yay, we're going to find out what happens post, Return of the Jedi with the New Republic, the New Jedi Order, what Leia's been up to, what Han's been up to, what Luke's been up to, what, Lando and Chewie and R2, C-3PO, some new characters. And I was obviously a EU fan from back in the day, the Expanded Universe, or Star Wars Legends now as they're called. So, there's a lot of things going on in my head, like, are they going to use Thrawn? Are they going to use this? Are they going to use that? And when I went to go watch Force Awakens, I thought it was okay. I mean, basically, it was a soft reboot, or you could just say a remake of New Hope. I kind of understand where they were going with it. I get it. They're trying to bring back old Star Wars fans as well as attract new Star Wars fans. So I can kind of see the decision J.J. Abrams made when it came to Force Awakens, though I wish some things would have been different. I guess a couple things would have been Starkiller Base, like, oh, it's bigger than the Death Stars, it's more destructive than the Death Stars, and oh boy, we've already wiped out the New Jedi Order, and Luke's missing, and oh yeah, the New Republic's about to be wiped out. Those things I didn't really care for. I would have rather it been more like the Clone Wars, where it was more like an even fight, where maybe the First Order did strike, but didn't completely wipe out the New Order Navy, which just happened to be in Hosnian Prime. So I really wish it would have been more even Steven in the fight instead of, Rebel Alliance 2.0 in the Resistance. By the way, the Rebel Alliance is way better in my opinion. I didn't have a problem with the characters, with, Poe and Finn, Rey, Kylo Ren, a.k.a. Ben Solo, or Snoke even, or Hux. Things did change in the next film, but we haven't gotten to Last Jedi yet. I did not like other things, like, for example, Maz Katana, or was her name Maz? Like, they made her out to be older than Yoda. Like, oh, she's better than Yoda. She's older and wiser than Yoda. I mean, it's just like this entire movie was about one-upping the original trilogy. Oh, we have to have something bigger, more destructive than the Death Star. We have to make the First Order more of a badass than the Empire. We have to make Maz older than Yoda. It's just a series of one-ups instead of trying to do their own thing. Now, I think that George actually had like treatments that he handed over to Bob Iger and Lucasfilms, his vision for what he thought the sequel trilogy should be. Now, once Disney acquired Star Wars and Lucasfilm, it became their property and they had a right to do of it as they please. But whenever I first saw the screenshot of, them all sitting around, some of the actors, I think JJ was there, I think Kathleen Kennedy was there as well for Force Awakens, I honestly thought that they had a vision planned. Like they were working on a vision, a script, start to finish when it came to the sequel trilogy. And even at the end of Force Awakens, I believed that it was all going to line up perfectly by the time we get to the 9th movie. We were wrong about that, weren't we? So that was the first mistake they made, they being Disney, Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, when they got J.J. Abrams on board. And say what you will about J.J. Abrams, at least if they would have just committed him to like all 3 movies, I think we would have gotten more of a definitive vision for the sequel trilogy. I think that's what they should have done, whether it was J.J. Abrams or another director, writer, entirely. That's what they should have done. They should have been scripting it out, start to finish, beginning, middle, and end. That way, when you have the final film come out this year, this week, then they would all fit together nicely. Despite the fact that the prequel trilogy is far from perfect, it still does fit together because it's a definitive vision start to finish from George Lucas. Now, could have he used a little help in the dialogue in the writing room? Yeah. I mean, he's a hell of a director. He's got some great visions. But some of the writing, yeah, a lot to be desired. But the original trilogy was great, but it wasn't just George Lucas. I think it was also his ex-wife his wife at the time that helped out with the original trilogy. And, I never expected the sequel trilogy to be as good as the original trilogy, but I was expecting it to be hopefully on par, maybe even a little bit better than the prequel trilogy. I mean, with the Force Awakens, it felt like Star Wars again. It felt more like the original trilogy than the prequels. And maybe that was part of the problem because it just, in hindsight, felt like a remake, a complete reboot. I know it was meant to be a soft reboot, but it feels more of a hard reboot / remake than, a reboot. So, The Force Awakens, overall, I thought it was okay. It was fine. And, Desert Planet, Jakku, the new Tatooine, and, Rey, the new Luke. I'm okay with her, by the way. I don't have a problem with Rey. Well, I didn't have a problem with her in Force Awakens. Her character. I have no problem with Daisy Ridley. I have no problem with John Boyega or any of the other actors or actresses. I just want to reiterate that this is not an attack on any of them personally. I think they all did the best they could with the material and the direction that they got in these movies. So like I mentioned, things went downhill when they made the decision, I guess that was Kathleen Kennedy's call, to have Rian Johnson take over for Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Like I said, they should have just had J.J. Abrams in charge from start to finish. But once Rian Johnson took over, that's when things went downhill. For one thing, I thought it was a huge mistake for them to pick up exactly where Force Awakens left off. That was the first mistake. What Rian Johnson should have done, and I know, like I said, hindsight's 20/20, is he should have picked up Last Jedi, say 6 to 12 months after the end of The Last Jedi. That way, some time would have gone by in between the 2 movies. Luke would have had time to actually train Rey. What I call her Rey, I don't know why. But he would have time to train Rey, and she would have a montage. That way she didn't come across like a Mary Sue. But unfortunately, you didn't have enough time there between episode 7 and 8 because they happen like right behind each other. Plus, you honestly didn't give Finn enough time to recover from his injuries at the end of Force Awakens. He needed more time too to recover. So, those were just a few mistakes. And then, of course, a lot of the other characters, I felt that there was a disservice done to them in both movies. Like, for example, Phasma. I mean, I love the actress that plays Phasma. She was great in Game of Thrones. like, she doesn't get that much screen time. She doesn't get her character fleshed out enough in Force Awakens. So you think that when they bring her back in Last Jedi, she's going to get a little bit more time. Nope, she doesn't. And then at the end, of course, they kill off Phasma. I mean, there's a lot of information about her in a novel, I think, or some, comics, but, for like the casual Star Wars fan, they don't know anything about Phasma unless they go and read a novel or the comics. But I felt like that was a disservice to her character. And then Hux was, I wouldn't call him a badass in Force Awakens, but he was a lot more intimidating. He was a lot scarier. He was very fascist in nature. And then in Last Jedi, he was a joke. It was just comic relief. And it was like a completely different character. So that was a huge mistake that Rian Johnson did when it came to Hux. So I didn't like that. And some of the other new characters they introduced. Rose Tico. Now, once again, nothing against the actress, but there were things I didn't really care about that arc between her and Finn. There was no point of them going to Canto Bight while they were being in this slow-ass chase across the stars between the First Order and what's left of the Resistance. That whole story was stupid, by the way. But I think they could have done a better job with Rose. They could have done a better job with Finn. They could have done a better job with Poe in all those scenes throughout that movie. And with Vice Admiral Holdo, and once again, I have nothing against the actress that plays Vice Admiral Holdo, Laura Dern. I like her. I didn't like her character, though. And I think you can still appreciate the actor or actress and not like the character. But it's not her fault. It's the writing. It goes all the way back to Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy. And this whole, notion of, Admiral Holdo not telling Poe, why she's doing the things she's doing results in him sending Finn and Rose off on their top secret mission. And that's when they pick up this other guy, DJ, and that's when everything gets undone and he ends up turning on them and betraying them to the First Order. And then the First Order basically wipes out almost all of the Resistance. So it was all an exercise in failure, that entire arc. So I didn't really care about that. And we didn't learn as much about Snoke as we were wanting to, like this mysterious, powerful dark side wielder who's been existing out in the unknown regions for a very long time, apparently, if you go by the novels. Like, he witnessed the fall of the Jedi Order and the Republic, the rise of the Empire, and the fall of the Empire, and the rise of the New Republic, setting himself differently as a new character from Palpatine, a.k.a. Darth Sidious, the Emperor, the Senate, whatever you want to call him. But, he gets killed off. And what's interesting is, I had a feeling that they were actually going to kill him off before I went to go watch the movie. I don't know why, but I just had that feeling. Yeah, this feels like he's going to be killed off in this movie. I don't think we're going to have Snoke in the third movie. And I guess my train of thought was that Kylo was going to become the main baddie, and it was going to come down to a final fight. But anyways, let's not jump ahead of ourselves. Let's stick with The Last Jedi. So, a lot of other things I didn't really care for. Those stupid Star Fortress bombers were ridiculous. They were so slow and easily destroyed. Justice for Admiral Akbar. I mean, WTF. Thanks for just killing off Admiral Akbar like that, Rian Johnson. Very cool. And killing off Luke. Now, I don't have a problem with Luke dying a hero's death because he's a warrior, he's a Jedi. But I feel like they shouldn't have killed him off at the end. The Force projection ruse was all right. I'm okay with it at the end. But I think instead of him dying off, I think that he should have been, obviously, it took a lot of energy out of him to do that. But then at the end, that should have been him getting off that rock and raising up his X-Wing from the water on Octo. And, him getting back in the X-Wing and flying off to join the fight against the First Order. And, completing race training. So I think that's what they should have done with Luke instead of, ripperoning him like they did with Han. Now, look, I don't have a problem with him killing off Han because, as most of you know, Harrison Ford wanted Han killed off at the end of Last Jedi. I mean, Return of the Jedi. So Return of the Jedi, Han Solo was supposed to be killed off, but he wasn't. And so, Harrison Ford just wanted him gone. Totally fine with that. So, once again, I think the two major problems here. One, they should have just let J.J. Abrams be in charge, start to finish, with episode 7, 8, and 9. And the second issue was that the time jump. there should have been a time jump in between episode 7 and 8. 6 months to 12-month period, so that you could flesh things out a little bit in between. Like the Resistance is on the run, the First Order's, spreading across the galaxy, taking over, either by force or coercion or, having star systems joining the First Order. But that was a huge oopsie on their part, because in the previous movie, their major weapon, Starkiller Base, was destroyed. It was destroyed, and who knows how many officers and soldiers and stormtroopers on that base were wiped out. And then the stormtroopers are a reboot. It's a complete reboot of the original trilogy in every single way. So, yeah, I had a problem with that. The whole movie. I mean, I left the movie, like, kind of with a numb feeling. I was excited about it. You know what? It's funny, because even when Luke tosses the lightsaber, it was funny to me for a moment. I was like, that was funny, because you don't expect it, right? And I can kind of get him, like, at the point where everything's gone wrong, with, his nephew, not his uncle, his nephew, Ben, falling to the dark side, becoming Kylo Ren, and the Jedi Order he helped build, destroyed, which is ridiculous, because I feel like the Jedi Order should have survived, and maybe some of the Jedi he was training killed off, but not all of them. Not a complete hard reset, like, Order 66-2, Electric Boogaloo. That shouldn't have happened either. The New Republic should have survived despite a huge attack, a huge blow. And like I said, it should have been more of an even fight between the First Order and the New Republic. Similar to Clone Wars. I think I've pointed that out once or twice how I feel about it. But at the end of the day, it did basically do a disservice to a lot of the characters that we were introduced to in Force Awakens. And the old characters were disserviced as well, including Luke, as well as Akbar, and the new characters like Phasma, Hux, and Snoke. We didn't get enough screen time with Snoke to learn more about him. And I would say that the main three were also disserviced. Finn's character, Poe, as well as Rey. I mean, this movie basically turned Rey into a Mary Sue. Now, you could accept the fact by the end of Force Awakens that she's obviously very powerful in the Force. We don't know why she's very powerful in the Force, but she is. And, the reason why she was winning in the fight against Kylo Ren is because, he had just killed his dad, and maybe he was still recovering from that reality that he had just did a horrible thing in order to try and, get himself, over to the dark side completely. And then, Chewbacca, shoots him with his bowcaster. So he has that injury he has to deal with. Plus, he just finished fighting off Finn. So obviously, you would say that Kylo Ren's just a little fatigued by the time he ends up fighting Rey, who obviously is a natural, force power. She has, I guess, a high midichlorian count. We don't know why at this point, but I can justify her winning the first fight against Kylo Ren. And, there were some things I liked about Last Jedi. The fight scene between, her and Kylo against the Praetorian Guard. That was badass, even though after the fact, several videos came out to make fun of it because the coordination wasn't the best. But at the time, it looked good. The musical score, by John Williams in all these movies is great. And I feel like a couple other decisions could have been done differently. I mean, a lot of people even said this. So some of the things I say might be repeated by others. I think that actually Rey should have joined Kylo there at that moment. They had a moment, right? They had a moment together, and she should have joined him, and they should have went off to try to do something new, right? Let the past die, and maybe they try to be, somewhere in the gray area. They try to do good when they can do good, but sometimes when they have to do bad, when they have to lean on the dark side, they do the dark side. And maybe a conflict arises in the hypothetical 9 episode where, they turn on each other or some nonsense. I don't know. But all in all, I feel like Last Jedi was probably the worst Star Wars movie to date. But that leads us to Episode 9. And I didn't include Solo or, Rogue One. Those are kind of little offshoot movies. But, so Rise of Skywalker is quite interesting because you have it back in the hands of J.J. Abrams after Rian Johnson did his thing with Episode 8. And what's strange about this whole situation is there's been tons of leaks regarding Rise of Skywalker. And I guess I was so disillusioned by a lot of problems I had of Last Jedi. By the way, I don't understand why people consider Last Jedi to be a masterpiece. I really don't. But we all have our different points of view on the subject. We all have our likes and dislikes. So that's okay, fine. Just because I like something doesn't mean someone else has to like it and vice versa. It's all of our opinions. By the way, I want to know your honest opinion about the sequel trilogy. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Were there things you liked about it? Or were there things you thought could have been done better as we move over into Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker? By the way, spoilers. We will be talking spoilers. I have yet to officially watch it. I'll probably go watch next week during the matinee. But thanks to the leaks out there and the fact that I've been watching so many other Star Wars channels, I practically know all the leaks. I know almost everything that happens. I guess it's because I just reached the point I just don't care. I mean, whenever the Star Wars Rise of Skywalker trailer came out several months ago, at Celebration, I think, I was kind of excited, with hearing Palpatine in the background laughing and then Ian McDiarmid on the stage, because I love Ian McDiarmid. He's great as Palpatine. I was excited. But then for some reason, seeds of doubt started getting planted into me. And the more and more I thought about it, the more I came to realize it was kind of a problematic. Now, it could have been done right, but I feel like from everything I know, once again, we will be talking spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled regarding Rise of Skywalker, you may want to bow out soon. I'll give you one final warning in a minute. Now, let's just talk about what my idea would have been, like for bringing back Palpatine. And I guess it could be similar to the expanded universe, whereas, his body was destroyed whenever Vader tossed him down the shaft of Death Star 2. Now, I realized that he was technically Anakin Skywalker when he did that. He chose to save his son Luke from being electrocuted to death. I get that. But the Emperor's essence could have survived. And with, the expanded universe, he had clones. And every time his body was about to, because the dark side would take its toll on his body. So he had clones made. And he would just keep transferring his essence to another clone, yada, yada, yada. So my similar idea was, because there's rumors that Matt Smith, who played the Doctor in Doctor Who, was going to be in the movie. He still might be. I think the rumor was he was going to be one of the Knights of Ren. And then some of us started thinking, well, maybe he's going to be like a younger Palpatine. So maybe there was Palpatine clones and he happened to transfer himself into a younger clone, and Matt Smith is going to be younger Palpatine, and at the same time he's going to be posing as one of the Knights of Ren, while at the same time, trying to lead Kylo and the Knights of Ren in the First Order, and even Rey, towards his own revelation that, he was Palpatine all along, and now he's younger and stronger. And now Rey and Kylo have to team up to defeat younger Palpatine. That would have been kind of cool. Like Palpatine the Second. I don't know. But apparently that's not going to be the case. I think it would have been better. But I think if Matt Smith is in Rise of Skywalker, it's probably similar to some of the other previous cameos. Like what Daniel Craig played a stormtrooper in Force Awakens. It's probably something like that, where Matt Smith just happens to have a little cameo. I think there's been several actors and actresses that have had cameos. I think Cara also had a cameo as an agent for the First Order in Force Awakens. But anyways, I digress. So we're going into spoilers now. Now, at first, I wanted to believe that the leaks coming out were bullshit. I actually, like some others, thought that the leaks was just a clever ruse by Star Wars, because obviously, Disney, Lucasfilm, not happy with the group known as the Phantom Menace. I guess you could say I consider myself part of the Phantom Menace unofficially, but I did want the sequel trilogy to succeed, okay? I wanted these films to be great, and I was willing to support these characters. But things have happened that make it very difficult for me to do so when it comes to the sequel trilogy. And unfortunately, from everything we have discovered regarding the leaks, it seems like Rise of Skywalker is going to be a very disappointing finish. Whereas with, Revenge of the Sith, a great finish to the prequel trilogy. Last Jedi, a pretty good finish to the original trilogy. Back then, a lot of people didn't really like it as much as Empire New Hope, but compared to these movies, Return of the Jedi is way better. So, like I said, spoilers out of the way, time to get to this. So, here's what happens. As some of you already know, Palpatine's coming back. Somehow he survived. He's on this weird planet called Exo blah blah. I don't know what it's called. And apparently, Kylo Ren, who's the Supreme Leader, they find out that the Emperor's out there. You know, he's put a message out there throughout the stars. And now the Resistance and the First Order are trying to find the Emperor. And I guess Kylo Ren finds him first, and then it turns out that the Emperor... By the way, there are trailers that they have put out that pretty much point to these spoilers being legit, and screenshots, so great job, Disney. Well done. So, apparently, at the beginning of the film, Kylo arrives to this planet where Palpatine's been hiding. This, I guess it's another Sith planet, because there's Sith statues and whatnot. And Palpatine's basically, saying, I've been every voice inside your head all this time, manipulating Kylo from a very early age, back when he was just young Ben Solo. So he's been Vader and Snoke, and basically manipulating him, posing as Vader. That's the reason why, I guess, in Force Awakens, he's talking to Vader's mask, because he actually thinks that he's communicating with the spirit of Darth Vader, his grandfather, Anakin Skywalker, where in actuality, it's been Palpatine the whole time, posing as both Vader and Snoke. Now, the problem with him posing as Snoke, because a lot of people now believe that Snoke was nothing more than either a puppet of Palpatine or a clone of Palpatine. If Snoke was a puppet of Palpatine, then why did he want Kylo to kill Rey in Last Jedi? Okay, why would Snoke want Kylo to do that? Like, Snoke was way more powerful than Rey. Rey tried her best to fight Snoke, and Snoke was just like throwing her around the room. I mean, she was no match to him, force power-wise. So now, Palpatine, apparently, once he reveals himself to Kylo, he tells Kylo to go find Rey. I don't think he says to kill her, but I think Kylo thinks that Palpatine wants him to kill her, but he doesn't. And he's like, well, she's not what she seems, because Palpatine actually knows Rey's true identity. I mean, he has a very personal connection to it. So I think a year has passed between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, which is a good thing, by the way. It's nice to have a little time jump for some things to develop. So you have the Resistance out there. I guess Leia's been training Rey, sadly Carrie Fisher passed away, like, after the filming of Last Jedi. So, like, J.J. Abrams is using, I guess, stock video that he never used in Force Awakens for, I don't know how it's going to work. But, yeah, even though Carrie Fisher's gone, I guess they're using video something in order to bring back Leia. And I think Leia's going to die in this one. But she's going to be the one who's training Rey, because it turns out Leia did do some training with Luke post Return of the Jedi, and that I never had any problem with. By the way, Leia is a strong woman, strong heroine in the original trilogy. She's not your typical damsel in distress. I mean, yeah, she was rescued, but she's also quite brave and quite strong and capable. She was smart, and she also had the Force, because she's Luke's sister. So it didn't really surprise me that she had Force powers and abilities, and let's see, all the way back to Force Awakens, because she sensed things, right? You could tell she was sensing things throughout some events that popped up, like Han being killed off, for example. But in Last Jedi, she did the whole Mary Poppins thing, and poor Admiral Akbar just got wrecked like he was nothing. Lack of appreciation there by Rian Johnson. But I didn't have a problem with that. It just seemed a little silly, though. And the fact that she died shortly after it was filmed, while it was still in post-production, it kind of made it a little problematic. But, I mean, I can understand why they chose not to just kill off Leia right there, because there is, I guess you could say, a moment between her and Luke near the end of Last Jedi. So I guess they just didn't want to scrap that, even though it would have made more sense for Leia to have died and then Luke to have survived episode 8, and then him dying in episode 9 and becoming a Force ghost. But he is a Force ghost in episode 9. Rumors are he doesn't get as much screen time. Like, he was supposed to have more time, but I think they edited it down, which I think was a big mistake. But there's like several versions of this film, and it was like basically to the last minute before they locked down on the final version of Rise of Skywalker. And they did a few reshoots. Now, reshoots is nothing new when it comes to movies, but I hear there was an awful lot of reshoots. Now, there's the leak story out there, and then there's the quote-unquote official story, which contradicts each other. And I really don't know which one to believe, to be honest. I'd be more inclined to believe the leaks than the official story. So there's a couple MacGuffins. There's the Sith dagger, and then there's the Wayfinder, which is basically a Sith holocron. So there's a few MacGuffins here that they're all after. Like, Kylo's after one, Rey's after one. Eventually, like, Rey and Kylo team up again. They end up, fighting on the remnants of the second Death Star on the Forest Moon of Endor, or one of the other moons of Endor, the Ocean Moon of Endor. Maybe there's a Forest Moon of Endor. Maybe there's an Ocean Moon of Endor. I don't know. But despite the fact that clearly at the end of Last Jedi, the entire Death Star goes blowing up into bits. And what in the story campaign of Battlefront 2, which is canon, it's obvious that there's a lot of debris of the Death Star, the second Death Star. So they end up fighting on the second Death Star, and she wounds Ben, and she ends up force healing him. Some people had a problem with her having this new ability to force heal, but force heal has been part of Star Wars lore for a while now. I do understand people having an issue of giving Rey too many powers, making her so OP, but force heal is actually a thing. So she force heals him after she beats him again. Like, Kylo just can't win a fight against Rey. Poor Ben. But as he's laying there dying or something, before she force heals him or after she force heals him, like, he sees a vision of his dad, Han. Even though his dad, Han, didn't have any force abilities and died and is not a Force ghost, he still sees a vision of his dad. And they have a similar conversation that they did at the end of Force Awakens. And then Kylo decides to toss his lightsaber. And then Rey finds out somewhere along the way that Palpatine's actually her grandfather. So whereas in Last Jedi, her parents were nobodies, I guess one of her parents was a daughter or son of Palpatine. And I guess Palpatine, while he was emperor, after, the Jedi Purge, and decided to settle down, start a family. I don't know. Good for you. I never heard about an empress, or the empress's son or the empress's daughter. Another retcon. Lots of retcons, by the way. So eventually, Ben comes back to the good side. He comes back to the light. The Knights of Ren are finally in this movie. We finally get to see the Knights of Ren in action. And at the end, it's basically a team up between Kylo and Rey versus Palpatine, who's on this arm or this machine, like his body is being kept alive or something. I don't know. But let's see. Also, the new Resistance with Lando. Hey, Lando's finally back. Thank you for bringing back Lando. Thank you. We've been asking for that for a while now. So Lando's back. We have some other characters they introduce. I guess over a year they've been able to build up the Resistance. And it looks like a final showdown between the Resistance and the First Order, which is teamed up with Palpatine's Sith fleet. These old Death Stars, these old Star Destroyers with Death Star tech. So these ancient Star Destroyers that are basically now Death Stars. I don't know. From the original trilogy, they all have the ability to blow up planets. Go figure. So he has this fleet. He has this red Sith troopers, which is basically the same armor as the First Order. Some stormtroopers, but they're painted red. And so there's a final fight, as some of you have seen in the trailers, between the Resistance and the Final Order. I think it's called the Final Order now. The team up between the First Order, the Sith fleet. Well, I think it's called the New Empire, the New Galactic Empire. I don't know. or the Dark Empire. And in the end, obviously the bad guys lose. I don't know the entire specifics, just the basics. So in the end, like the fight between Palpatine versus Ben and Rey, like Ben, like I guess gets force pushed into like over a ledge or something, you know. And since we don't see him die, obviously he doesn't die there. But it goes down to a final fight between Rey and Palpatine. Now before this, when the revelation is that Rey is a Palpatine, she's the granddaughter of Palpatine. Like she has that vision of her turning to the dark side, of having a sweet Swiss Army, double-bladed lightsaber, and that only lasts for a moment. But then she decides to give up after everything, and then I guess Force Ghost Luke tells her, "Hey, you can't give up. You know, you have to defeat him. It's up to you." That whole line, all the generations now are in you. And I guess that's when it's revealed that, Leia also had a lightsaber. And so she ends up getting, Anakin's lightsaber and then Leia's lightsaber. And then she gives one of the lightsabers to Ben. And then they fight Palpatine. And, of course, like I mentioned, Palpatine force pushes Kyle away. By the way, Palpatine's getting stronger because he's force draining. Force drain also is another force ability. That's known. He's force draining, Ben and Rey. Because I guess that ties into that other line that was in one of the trailers, like, "Oh, you're coming together. It'll be your undoing." Because now that they're both together, he can vampire both of them. And so I guess that's what he's doing. It's making him stronger. Like, he goes from being, like, basically a corpse that's barely alive. I think he speaks telepathically to Kylo and Rey before this point. But whenever he starts taking their essence and becoming stronger, then he gets his yellow eyes back and he gets strong again. But then Rey ends up with both Luke and Leia's lightsaber, or Anakin, whatever, her lightsaber now. And so she has two lightsabers. She's dual wielding. And hey, if I'm a Jedi, I'm all about dual wielding. And, Emperor's doing his force lightning thing, like da-da-da-da-da on his granddaughter. Hey, dude, you don't do that to your grandkids. That's just rude, man. And so Rey's fighting back. She's holding him back with one lightsaber. Then she does a sweet double hold back, and then it causes like a reversal of the force lightning back on Palpatine. And I guess it's overwhelming, and it disintegrates him. So, Palpatine gets disintegrated by his granddaughter. And that's no way to treat your grandfather. But in the process, this whole arena, the Sith arena where the throne is and all that nonsense, gets destroyed, killing Rey in the process. Well, temporarily. And so Ben climbs back up. He sees that Rey's dead, and then he sacrifices his life in order to bring Rey back from the dead. So we don't really get a Disney happy ending here. I mean, I think that would have been better, him redeemed. Because if you think about it, Ben's been manipulated since he was a kid. With Palpatine in his head, manipulating him from start to finish. So maybe he deserves a redemption, okay, after all that nonsense. And he deserves to be with the girl. Like him and Rey, saving each other. And then they go off to form a new Jedi Order. And they have solo Palpatine babies. I don't know. But apparently he dies. And, there's several other Force ghosts, like Luke and Leia Force ghosts. And there's some sort of montage, harkening back to the original trilogy. And I think somewhere along the way, C-3PO ends up sacrificing himself or getting another memory wipe in order to read the Sith dagger, another one of the MacGuffins. So I guess at the end of the day, the basics is obviously the Final Order's defeated. All those new Death Star, Star Destroyers, ancient original trilogy Imperial Star Destroyers now of Death Star tech are destroyed. And Palpatine disintegrated, and the First Order, the Final Order, gone. Ripperonis. The Resistance wins. I guess the New Republic will return, or whatever. And I don't know what becomes of Finn, or Poe, Lando, Chewie, R2, or some of the new characters, Rose. I guess they all get happy endings. I don't know. Maybe Poe and Finn get to go bromance off into the stars along with Rose and this new girl that they introduce. Who plays her? She's like a bounty hunter. But maybe Poe and her end up together. and maybe Finn and Rose end up together and they go on double dates across the stars. I don't know. They go on adventures, and maybe Lando and Chewie and R2 and 3PO end up in the Millennium Falcon, and they jump off into hyperspace having their own adventures. And I think there's another character or two I'm leaving out. Like, maybe one of them's like Lando's daughter, I think. I don't know. But then, this is the part that I find hilarious. A lot of this is nonsense, by the way. But apparently it's true. For some reason, I guess because J.J. Abrams thought it was great. A great way to wrap up the film. That it would end on Tatooine. Now, look, it made sense for the prequel trilogy to end on Tatooine because we know that's where Luke is. We know that's where Obi-Wan ends up. So it made sense at the end of Revenge of the Sith for Obi-Wan and Luke to end up on Tatooine. Now, bear in mind, Rey has never been to Tatooine. She was abandoned by her parents on Jakku, one of them being Palpatine's kid. I guess. I don't know. Is it actually Palpatine's kid, or is it like a science experiment that Palpatine had made? I don't know. But anyways, for some reason, she decides, along with BB-8, to go to Tatooine. By the way, BB-8 was Poe's droid, not Rey's droid. So technically, Rey should have ended up with R2. I'm just saying. But anyways, so I don't know exactly how everything ends for everybody, but I guess I'm going to go watch during the matinee because I'm just curious. And I'm sure it's going to look great. The music's going to be awesome and all that other stuff. And maybe it's better than it sounds. I hope it is. But the reviews so far have been kind of somewhere in the middle. Some good, some bad. But I'll still go watch it because I just have to enjoy it for myself. So she ends up on Tatooine. I'm sure all the music's playing right now. It's just beautiful. You know, John Williams score. Fantastic. And she ends up at, Owen and Aunt Beru's house. You know, they got torched by the stormtroopers in New Hope. So it's been decades and decades since anyone's been there, most likely. Because Luke didn't go back. He only went back to go rescue Han. And both Luke and Anakin mentioned how much they hated that planet. Anakin hated Tatooine because he was a slave on that planet. He hates the sand, as most of you know. Luke wasn't too fond of Tatooine either. You know, all he ever wanted to do was leave. But his uncle and aunt wouldn't let him until they were dead. And then once they were gone, he's gone. Him and Obi-Wan, head off to Mos Eisley. They hop into the Millennium Falcon with Chewie and Han, and they're out of here, along with C-3PO and R2. Luke only came back to rescue Han Solo. So, why did Rey decide to go back to this abandoned, torched hut in the middle of the deserts of Tatooine, this moisture farm? She's never been there, in order to bury the lightsabers. She ends up burying Luke, Anakin's lightsaber, and Leia's lightsaber. Now, kyber crystals, are probably a rarity in the galaxy. And there's a lot of information out there that all but confirms that Ilum was Starkiller Base, and that's where the Jedi for centuries and millennia took younglings and Padawans to get their kyber crystals in order to have lightsabers. So she has 2 functional lightsabers that she should hold on to if she plans on building a new Jedi Order. Now, maybe she's not going to, but she should hold on to them. And then her, first 2 students, pass on those lightsabers to her next 2 students in her new Jedi Order. But she decides to bury the lightsabers instead. Okay. And it ends apparently with some random woman in the middle of this desert, right, on this moisture farm that's been abandoned for decades. Comes up to her and asks, out of nowhere, like, "Who are you?" Just for no reason. And she's like, "I'm Rey." But who are you? And then apparently, like, she sees Force ghosts of Luke and Leia in the distance. By the way, where's Ben's Force ghost? Like, where's old Ben? Doesn't Ben deserve a Force ghost? Anakin got a Force ghost. And he did way worse shit as Darth Vader than Ben did as Kylo Ren. I mean, yeah, Kylo Ren did some bad stuff, but nothing compared to Vader. So, I mean, at the very least, Ben deserves to be a Force ghost and, at least chill with Rey for the rest of her days. And then when she dies, then they're Force ghosts together forever. So, maybe there will be a Force ghost Ben hanging out at the hut with Rey as well, and they can just, I don't know. Maybe they get their happy ever ending, Disney-esque. I don't know. But so she thinks about who she is, and she's like, Rey Skywalker. And apparently that's how it ends. And I've seen a screenshot of her and the two sons of Tatooine and BB-1. Oh, and I think she's turned her staff into a yellow-bladed lightsaber, which is cool because ever since the first poster with her staff, I could always envision Rey wielding a similar lightsaber to Maul. So I always thought that eventually that's what she would do, is build a double-bladed lightsaber because it made sense for her fighting form. Because, she grew up on Jakku. She obviously knew how to use that staff. It made more sense than a standard lightsaber. And so for some reason, it's a yellow lightsaber. Okay. So here's the thing. Unless Rey also happens to be half Skywalker, like a little bit of DNA from either Luke or Anakin, when he was Darth Vader, that Palpatine happened to get, I guess like monthly annual physicals, right, in the Empire, and, they had to take some blood from Anakin or Vader at the time, and, Palpatine, saved some of that DNA, and he mixed it with his DNA in order to create, ultimately, his granddaughter, Rey. So unless she happens to be half Skywalker in that DNA, half Palpatine, half Skywalker, then technically, Rey cannot be a Skywalker. In other words, from a certain point of view, my point of view, the Emperor wins. Basically, the Emperor wins because it's a Palpatine that rises. The rise of Palpatine. Rey is a fucking Palpatine. Therefore, the Palpatines win. The Skywalkers are all wiped out. Anakin's gone. Luke's gone. Leia's gone. Ben's gone. I don't think that Ben had a sister or another brother. I mean, in the expanded universe, Han and Leia had several kids. I think 3, if I remember correctly. And Luke also had a kid, by the way. Him and Mara Jade, but that never happened, apparently. Damn it. I think in a lot of ways the EU was better. I mean, there were some silly things about the EU, but yeah. So, yeah. It just doesn't sound good on paper. It may look better on the big screen with the music and the special effects and all that. But at the end of the day, yeah, in my opinion, the Star Wars Sequel Trilogy is garbage. That's just how I feel about it. It had so much potential. Yet, at the end of the day, it's a hot mess. Now, maybe instead of giving Episode 9 to J.J. Abrams, what they should have done is, you know what, Ryan? You wrecked the trilogy with Episode 8. You got to make it right with Episode 9. So, fine. You're going to go change things with Episode 8. You're going to change the plan. Then maybe Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger has been like, okay, fine. Here, Rian Johnson, you get Episode 9 as well, buddy. You have to, make this work in the final movie. Because apparently there was, I think, some sort of loose script or structure or draft of how they kind of wanted it to play out, but then Ryan obviously changed a few things with Episode 8. So overall, a lot of potential. It could have been a great trilogy and an awesome way to wrap up the Skywalker saga, but it's not a great way to wrap it up because you've killed off all the Skywalkers. There's no more Skywalkers. They're all gone. And like I said, unless Rey is a science experiment that was half Skywalker, either Anakin, probably Anakin, or Luke. I would say Anakin. Like the granddaughter of Anakin and, the Emperor. And she's not a Skywalker in my honest opinion. Ben Solo is technically a Skywalker because, Leia was Anakin's daughter. So that makes him a Skywalker, even though he's a Solo. But I think you get the point. She has no biological lineage to the Skywalker line, who apparently was created by Palpatine and Darth Plagueis. Now, here's the thing. Darth Plagueis should have been Snoke, in my opinion. That's what I think they should have done. And it would have tied... I know others have mentioned some of this stuff as well. Great minds think alike. But a lot of people allude to the fact, Palpatine has that speech in the Opera House with Anakin about his master, Darth Plagueis. Even though he never says it's his master, it's later implied that it was his master. And maybe Darth Plagueis fakes his death, makes Palpatine think he killed him. but instead wandered off and has been existing doing his own thing. And maybe in the end, it wasn't Palpatine, it wasn't Darth Sidious or the Senate, whatever you want to call him. It was his master, Darth Plagueis, that was the real puppet master behind everything from start to finish. And Snoke just happened to be another alias for Darth Plagueis. Now, I realize that Darth Plagueis was a Mun. I believe that was his species, according to legends. I don't know if that's canon. I would like for that to be canon, but I think the species was the Mun. You know, the banking class, the banking cartel from the Clone Wars era. He was one of those species, but he was very powerful in the dark side of the Force. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's unfortunate that Disney did this with the sequel trilogy. Now, like I said, I like what Filoni and Favreau are doing with The Mandalorian. I hear good things. It's not perfect, but I definitely want to check it out. And I'm excited that we're getting one more season of the Clone Wars finally after all these years. Hopefully that Filoni will be able to wrap that up, that story. And I know that this will technically not going to be the last Star Wars movie. It's just the end of the I guess the saga. But they will have future Star Wars films, and hopefully Kathleen Kennedy's on her way out the door. And maybe they'll put Favreau or Filoni in charge of Lucasfilms going forward. They need to. They need someone that actually understands Star Wars and understands the fans. And I hate the fact that the fans that had a problem with Last Jedi have been demonized by the mainstream media and called trolls and shills and toxic and all sorts of awful names when it was just an awful movie. It could have been better if Ryan would have done some different things. If JJ would have been in charge start to finish, it may have not been perfect because I don't think JJ Abrams is the greatest thing ever, far from it. But at least you would have had a definitive vision with the sequel trilogy. It's the same thing with the prequel trilogy. That was far from perfect. There was issues with that. But at least you can go back and watch episode 1, 2, and 3 together, and it fits. It works. So I don't know if Rise of Skywalker at the end is going to be down at the bottom of the list. It'll probably be somewhere in the middle at best. But at the very least, I mean, we still have the Clone Wars. You know, we now have Mandalorian. And, of course, we have the original trilogy and, you know, for all intents and purposes, the prequels to still enjoy as Star Wars fans. And the hope is maybe Disney and Lucasfilm will learn from the mistakes under the Kathleen Kennedy era, a.k.a. the sequel trilogy, and maybe they won't repeat history going forward with future Star Wars films. I know they're going to take a break, and maybe they'll go back to the Old Republic era. That's something a lot of us Star Wars Old Republic fans have been wanting. You know, that'd be awesome if they did that, you know make Revan canon, and all that stuff. But, yeah, I'm just, at the end of the day, I feel like the sequel trilogy was garbage. And that's just my honest view and opinion. Once again, it's nothing against any of the actors or the actresses. And, look, I wanted to like Rey. I do kind of like her. I mean, yeah. But I feel like that her character was just done wrong. They made her too much of a Mary Sue. She should have had a montage. I think they're going to try and give her a montage in Rise of Skywalker, which by the end may make her character a lot more likable, even though it feels like she's getting everything. Well, like I said, it's technically not the Rise of Skywalker. It should be called the Rise of Palpatine. But that's my views and opinions about the sequel trilogy. I rambled a little bit. You know, what I was hoping for from it and what we're left with at the end of the day. It's beyond our control, unfortunately, as fans. We can't go back. We can't fanfic it. It is what it is. And like I said, there's a lot of people that worked on the movies really hard. You know, those that were part of the crew, the lighting, camera, special effects, the orchestra behind John Williams, the actors themselves. They all did the best they could, but they were all failed by those at the top, just like the fans were failed. And the failure lies with three people, in my honest opinion. Kathleen Kennedy, Rian Johnson, and J.J. Abrams. And that's how I feel about it. If they would have gone with a definitive vision from start to finish, it would have been way better. If they would have stuck and made J.J. Abrams, stick to all three movies, start to finish, episode 7, 8, and 9, we'd probably have a much different product right now, because I believe that the original plan was for Snoke to survive. I don't think they ever intended to bring back Palpatine. I know they say that. That's BS. I don't believe it. Like I said, why would Palpatine want to first have his puppet try to kill Rey and then not kill Rey. So I think Rey's original story arc was going to be a lot different. I think either she was going to end up being a Skywalker or maybe even a Kenobi or something else entirely. But like I said, once again, we have no control over the finished product, for better or worse. But anyways, I want to know your honest views and opinions about the sequel trilogy. And for those of you that have had a chance to watch Rise of Skywalker, you're welcome to chime in with your honest views and opinions below. And if your opinion is different than mine, then that is welcome as well. So your thoughts, your views and opinions about the characters, the story arc, what went right, what went wrong, and the vision you would have liked to see when it came to the sequel trilogy of Star Wars. All that, of course, welcome below in the comments section.